My name is Chris Ryan, this is Mallory Rubin. We are here to ask 5 questions about Season 3 of Stranger Things, which is debuting on July 4th on Netflix. It's a show that Mallory and I really like.
The Mind Flayer is with us in the studio, as you can see.
I don't know that Stranger Things necessarily needs the massive unpacking that you guys gave Game of Thrones, but it's still, there's a lot of really interesting questions to unpack here.
Yeah, it's a rich and multicolored text.
Yeah.
We have Eggos, we have New Coke coming back into our lives.
We've got Nikes, yeah.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
You get your Tailwinds, you get your Blazers, you got your Blazers.
I got my Blazers.
An abundance of cultural references and Easter eggs, and the real sustenance of life. You might think it's Eggos, 11 might think it's Eggos. What is it, Chris?
It's friendship.
Friendship!
Yeah.
Human connection!
It's a really good show about friendship. We're gonna talk about the friendships that we've seen on this show so far, but let's first start with a slightly darker note, which is what's up with the Upside Down. The Upside Down is essentially the other dimension in this show where Will was brought into in the first season, where 11 has obviously spent a lot of time. We thought at the end of season 2, the 11 locked the door on that one.
Close the gate.
Closed the gate. There was that huge special effects sequence at the end of season 2 where she was like psychically just like shutting the doors.
That's right. But then we got the flash of the Mind Flayer still active.
So the Mind Flayer is that big 50-story spider that seems to lurk in Will's mind, but may lurk over Hawkins itself. It's this otherworldly monster. We don't really know its powers. It seems to have a psychic connection with Will. It seems to be able to control the demi-dogs when they get out of the gate. Because every show needs a villain. Any show like this needs like a Darth Vader or a Night King or something. And the Mind Flayer seems to be what they're building up as like the big bad in this show.
So I think that the question is still open-ended about whether we have more than one big bad, because we got the cool moment in season 2 in the otherwise very divisive bottle episode where we were introduced, well, we had been introduced in the very opening sequence of season 2, but really got to know 8, Callie, another child with magical powers, and in that whole episode we learned that Brenner, out there, alive.
Big Nick's fan? Yeah.
So he's in a great place right now.
Nick's fandom turns people into government experiment scientists.
So if Brenner enters the story again in season 3, and if you parse the trailers, there are all of these new figures. Now, whether those people have any sort of development as actual characters of consequence of the story, or whether they are soldiers for the government, perhaps a foreign government, perhaps soldiers of the Mind Flayer himself.
Russians?
We don't know.
We don't know.
Perhaps. Yeah. And so then you pair that with the Mind Flayer and this existential looming threat, the veil of shadows.
Yeah.
What does the Mind Flayer want? Well, how is it described throughout season 2? As a virus. What was Will ultimately? The host. Yeah. So the Mind Flayer needs a new host. Billy, my dude, we're looking at you.
Yeah, based on the trailer, it doesn't look like Billy's doing great with, he does not have the Mind Flayer vaccine, unfortunately.
He now has as many splotches of Mind Flayer vein injections running through him as he has abs.
Yes, and that's a lot. That's a lot. The Mind Flayer is essentially about control. Like, we don't have an articulation of the desires of the Mind Flayer, like whether it wants to inhabit people, whether it wants to eradicate people from the world, whether he wants to, if it's a he or she, but whether it wants to get its world into our world and break down the gate and have the Upside Down be everybody's existence. We'll have to see. The show, I think, set this up in the first season, and in the second season kind of was like feeling around in the dark to figure out what to do with the Upside Down, what to do with like the mythology that's that's behind the show, essentially.
Yeah, and one of the questions that connects to basically motive for the Mind Flayer is scope.
Yeah.
How big is the story? How big is the world? Because there's this dissonance at play in a show that, again, we love, where the thing that is really the pulse of it, the heartbeat of it, is the town, Hawkins, and the relationships that forge in that town. The bonds between the kids and the adults. Chopperheads, where you at? The further afield you go, the more, by definition, that you move away from the people you're invested in and the bonds that you're invested in. But if you don't do that, then how big, can the threat be really?
How many bad things can happen to one small town? It's a really interesting question. Game of Thrones was able to grow and grow and grow. In fact, part of the wonder of that show was you never knew where it was going to take you. You never knew if you were going to go to Dorne. You never knew if you were going to go to Bravos or to the north or whatever.
What Chris is saying really is, what is Stranger Things' Marine?
Well, is it Pittsburgh? You know, is it
Chicago?
Is it
Go back to Chicago.
Or is this really just about a small town? And is this about a small town at a very particular time in American history? We'll get to that. But first we want to get to our next question, which is what is up with our favorite characters?
Oh, yes.
Let's start though with probably the heartbeat of the show. And that's the
David Harbour's mustache. No?
That's the relationship between Mike and Elle. So 11 and Mike, young love.
Yeah, it's
They're
beautiful.
growing older. 11 is now, it seems like she's fully in the teenage mix. You know, she's not being hidden in a cabin anymore, subsisting entirely off of breakfast foods.
Well, we don't know what her diet
Well,
is.
if she was you subsisted off of breakfast foods for like 20 years, didn't you?
Why are you speaking in the past tense?
Yeah, exactly. What do you think about the Mike and Elle relationship? Is it just going to be young love blossoming?
You know, I think that it's beautiful.
Tread lightly.
The moment when Elle walked into the Snowball, the school dance at the end of season 2, and the way Mike looked at her, it was just really special. And that's the kind of nostalgia and universal humanity that the show really does expertly tap into.
Yeah, and
everybody has a Mike or an Elle out there, right?
Yes.
And to allow you to go back and think about that time in your life and who that was for you or who you wanted it to be and maybe it wasn't is a pretty cool thing.
Yeah, and the emotions you feel at that time in your life are so intense. If you then multiply them by like this idea that there's this looming threat out there, which I think a lot of people did think of in the 80s anyway, because it was like there was the Cold War. There was this idea that there was a villain across on the other side of the world that wanted to destroy you, and there was a little bit of panic around that.
When Nancy and Jonathan go to Murray Bauman's journalistic lair, what does he have by 11? You know, Russian, question mark? That's who people think that 11 is.
Yeah.
When she's just this mysterious shadow. She's a shadow in a way too. And the other thing about the Mike and 11 bond, in addition to just how their relationship fits into the friend group at large, the party, is that obviously 11 is the superhero and she's the one with the powers to save them, but that means that she's also, by definition, at the greatest risk, or at least right there, we have to assume with Will.
Yeah.
And one of the things that the showrunners have said, candidly, while teasing the season and setting up the season, is that the Mind Flayer is aware of 11 now.
Yeah.
Because of the gate closing.
In some ways, I mean, they're doing an interesting hybrid of like a huge trope of 80s pop culture, which was this very special character who, if they are revealed, will be the subject of like government or military meddling, whether it was like Daryl or E.T. That came up a bunch, especially in the first few years of the 80s, where it was this fear that there would be government scientists coming to your small town to take away your friend. So that, I think 11 is an interesting stand-in for E.T. Let's talk about some of the other characters we're really looking forward to seeing. Personally, Dustin and Steve.
Oh yeah,
Bros
the best.
for life.
The
I love
best.
it, yeah.
They're incredible. That relationship was such an organic, natural thing. You know, some people know this, it's out there that Steve originally was supposed to be killed off early in the show run.
Yeah, he's like the Jesse Pinkman of the show.
Yeah, it's just such a charismatic presence that he not only ended up staying around, but his character evolved from basically the guy who was supposed to be the asshole jock into this delightfully, consistently surprising beacon of love and joy.
He's kind of gone
and
from,
Hairspray?
Yeah, he's gone from Andrew McCarthy to Ferris Bueller. And now he's like the coolest kid that you could want to know in high school, it seems like.
Yeah, he's just giving Dustin hair tips on girls, though of course his own relationship did not necessarily work out the way that he would have wanted it to, but you learn a lot from your failures, kids.
Let's talk a little bit of, so Nancy and Jonathan, obviously, they got together in the second season, heartbreak for Steve. I still think, we talked about this on the Watch podcast, I think he's still in the mix there for Nancy. What other couples you want to talk about? Let's talk about Jopper.
There's a shot in one of the trailers for season 3 where he's at a dinner table at what appears to be a nicer restaurant. Could be a date. Could it be a date with Joyce? You know, I think that a sincere achievement of the show is that while the kids are the focus of it, and they are the core of it, and they are the soul of it, they've made us care just as much about the adults and about the older teens. Like, we are invested in every stratosphere of age and relationship. And one of the things that, again, the homie Murray Bauman, just a font of wisdom, says to Nancy and Jonathan when he's basically pointing out to them that they're in love with each other is, you know, what's the real shit? shared trauma.
But that is what brings them all together as a family in this community. That is essentially the football team in Friday Night Lights. Is this exposure to an other dimension and all this trauma?
Yes, and also just the pain in their own lives.
Yeah.
You know, the human pain. I mean, Hopper lost his daughter. You know, his family was taken away from him. And Joyce, we know that things did not work out with Lonnie, that she has worked as a single mother to provide for her children and her family, and those people deserve love and happiness. I'm not sure this is a story about love and happiness, but I do think it's a story about how your life can fundamentally change when you find somebody else who sees you clearly.
Sure.
And I really think they can be that for each other. I'm very invested in it.
That's a really good way of looking at it.
What about Will? Is Will gonna get to just be a kid?
I just feel like Will needs to thug it out. Will needs to kind of maybe become a loner. If he goes to the mall, I want him to just be like, no, guys, I'm going to walk the mall solo today. You know?
Yeah. I'm going to Spencer's Gifts alone.
I don't know.
To pick out a new
Will's
black
had
light.
a tough menu for the first 2 seasons. He's basically been captive for the first 2 seasons. He was in the Upside Down for almost all of season 1. People thought he was dead. Season 2, he's back, but he's still really shook from what he experienced in season 1.
And then he becomes the spy.
And the Duffer Brothers have said that they are going to loosen up a little bit with Will and like let him have a little bit of fun. So I would love for like Will to be the first guy to try a Heineken, you know, and just be like, boy, you guys, I got wasted last night. And it's like he had 1 sip, you know.
Do you think that's misdirection? The whole Will is going to get to be a regular kid thing? Because
I don't think they do the like J.J. Abrams we're lying to people thing.
Well,
like I think they're just like, don't worry, we're not going to make this kid like possessed again.
But if you watch the trailers, there are multiple shots of him like touching his neck where he has a sensation and a feeling, you know, and that's where he said it all started for him in the first place. Or sweating profusely as he looks at the Ghostbusters picture, presumably thinking, I don't recognize these people or this person that I was or this time in my life. Now, maybe that's just because he's so altered by his experiences.
Sure.
But I don't know if just because Will isn't the host right now, that means he's disconnected from that experience
I don't
entirely.
necessarily think it is. Hopefully he will be able to use that experience as a power.
Right.
At some point. I wouldn't want to go any further though without mentioning Billy and Mrs. Wheeler.
Oh my God. Is it appropriate?
I just
to talk
think that
about
we
this?
can say that they have chemistry. How about that? As a former lifeguard, I can say that it's a position where people look at you and they're like, I want to spend time with that guy.
Did you ever drive around your neighborhood looking for Mad Max, knock on the Wheeler family home front door, find yourself greeted by Mrs. Wheeler, who had just emerged, still sopping wet from her bath where she was reading a romance novel, losing herself in the moment and in the possibilities that awaited her. And did you then maybe engage in a either torrid affair or an affair of the mind, folks?
Well, yeah, I was going to say the closest I ever got to something like that is when I could unscramble Skinamax. After trying like 35 times, switching the channel up and down, and then finally get like that 1 second of softcore.
Yeah, well, that seems to be what's happening at the pool.
Yes.
A lot of softcore.
Yeah.
A lot of side eye, a lot of looks.
It has a real Fast Times at Ridgemont High vibe.
Yes.
Yeah, so that's our next question. What are some of the pop culture references that we might see this year? The Duffer Brothers have talked a little bit about Back to the Future being a major reference. Ghostbusters was last year. So Goonies and Back to the Future and Explorers all came out in the summer of '85. But Back to the Future, interestingly enough, just I have no knowledge, is not a spoiler video, time travel. So that is also an element to maybe what they opened up underneath the Hawkins lab, that portal could possibly have time travel. Also, I would just say about the music, you know, sometimes like music is not like a huge part of Stranger Things because it has such a good score. It has that really awesome John Carpenter style keyboard score.
And because even though Jonathan told Will he made him a new mixtape, he still just plays The Clash.
Yes, right. Which is
People great.
Hung on to music for way longer. They were like, what's the new release on Friday? It was like, Born in the USA was just like on the charts for 18 months. But I would say that the pop music of the time, if those kids are listening to the radio, it's like Crazy For You by Madonna was a big song back then in summer '85. Boys of Summer by Don Henley was a big song. Voices Carry, Till Tuesday, Raspberry Beret by Prince. So there's just like incredible music on pop radio. And then if Jonathan is keeping it punk, is Jonathan getting in the van and going to see Husker Du Is he going to see the Replacements? Do you know any of these bands?
Of course.
Yeah,
How
so
dare
you
you?
never know. I mean, like, we could get punk rock Jonathan on the road going to see like the first Replacements show in Indiana.
I hope so. Jonathan looks a little more buttoned up than usual in the trailers. He's got a shorter haircut, appears to be wearing a button down, maybe a summer job. He and Nancy are, sitting next to each other in chairs where they're either like, I don't know, at a courthouse pertaining, like seeking out a marriage certificate, or maybe they're like interning at the town newspaper.
Oh, that would be cute.
Photographer, reporter.
Oh, yeah.
Little dream team dynamic duo. Who knows? You know who's going to be listening to the radio at his summer job, though? Steve.
Yeah.
He's at the ice cream shop in the mall.
Let's talk about malls.
Cute girl working with him who's making fun of him for being friends with Dustin.
So let's talk about the mall. Our next question was, what's up with STARCOURT? STARCOURT seems to be the major setting for the season 3 of Stranger Things. At least it's been in the promotional materials.
Yes.
It seems that they work at the mall, they hang out at the mall. Malls were really coming of age in the mid 80s. They started just building these huge retail shopping centers with lots of parking in the suburbs, and you would just go out there and you'd spend your entire day wandering around. And they would just kind of be basically the new town centers. They would be the new city squares. They were kind of the new parks. We've talked a lot about malls on the Watch podcast this week.
Love a mall.
But it's an intoxicating place to set a TV show.
Yeah, and it's an intoxicating place to be when you're a kid, discovering your own freedom. It's so associated in our minds, I think, with tapping into your independence for the first time in your life. And not that these kids have lacked independence. I literally can't recall the last time Ted Wheeler remembered that he had children.
That's true.
We have a couple settings that seem to be the most prominent for the season. We get a lot of shots in the trailers of this town fair where it seems like something is going to go awry.
Mayor Carrie Elways,
just welcoming in the holiday. Happy 4th of July to everyone in Hawkins. We have the pool, obviously. There are some shots that seem to maybe be taking place elsewhere, like these mysterious shots of Eleven on the beach with the Mind Flayer, red lightning in the sky. But as you said, the bulk of the shots, and certainly the shots where we see what appears to be the new monster, it's the mall.
Yeah, and there is an episode called The Battle of STARCOURT, so we imagine that something major sort of set piece happens at the mall. The thing you're saying about the independence is right on. Malls were kind of a safe place to be on your own. As a kid, if you're 12, 13, 14, and you're just like wanted to have a day to yourself, your parents could relatively safely drop you off at a certain time, pick you up at a certain time, where you could ride your bike there or take the bus there or whatever, and hang out there all day long. And you get something to eat, go to the food court. What was your food court order?
I loved pretzel time. Get a soft pretzel at pretzel time. Swing by Vacaro's Bakery for a cannoli. Love
These
a
are
cannoli.
very local. You really like rich, like European flavors.
Obviously, Mrs. Fields cookies. Now I know this is
disappointing.
a sensitive subject for you, and I'm sorry to bring it up.
I just don't understand.
Nobody thinks that.
No, because Great American Cookie Company had the malls on lock, and they had the big cookie pie, and no one ever got it, but it was really nice to know it was there.
Yeah.
And their cookies were superior, and then Mrs. Fields comes through.
Also with a cookie pie, by the way.
Yeah, Big Cookie comes through and shuts down the American dream. And I thought it was just like one of the great tragedies of my young life.
Serving up, in place of the American dream, delicious cookies. Freshly baked, warm, gooey, delicious, wonderful.
It's not like Great American Cookie Company wasn't like stale, cold cookies.
I'm sure they were great. I'm sure they were great. There's room for both.
Here's the other thing.
At STARCOURT Mall, certainly.
I always really loved, you mentioned Orange Julius. I loved an Orange Julius.
Delicious. Delicious. You need that refreshing beverage. You need a kick of sugar, right? You need something to get you through the phases of your day, because you're going to be not only doing things, but you're going to be with people. And that, I think, is the through line of the new settings.
Yeah.
What do a town fair, a community pool, and a mall have in common?
Great hangs.
Places to congregate.
Yeah.
What is the difference between that and what we've seen in Stranger Things so far? Hawkins, people are spread out.
Yeah.
You're always having to drive to
Joyce
go
lives
find
in
someone.
the woods. Yeah.
Right. Is that street even real when someone says, Mirkwood? When we get back to what we were talking about at the top of this with what does the Mind Flayer want? Well, what's the Mind Flayer after in Dungeons and Dragons, the creature that they named this after?
Yeah. Mind control.
So if you have a bunch of people in one place, it seems likely that this could be, and there are some shots, again, if you parse the trailer, and to repeat what Chris said, we have no knowledge of what's actually coming. We've just watched the trailers. There are a couple shots of people who appear to be in zombified states. Blank stares, marching, looking. Now maybe they're just scared.
Yeah.
But maybe they have been mind flayed. I don't know. There's also that new creature. Comes in and grabs the walkie-talkie with his claw.
Oh, yeah. So if the people are all mind flayed,
I mean, I don't know.
does that leave it up to the pets to save the world?
Well,
Because that's our last question, and I just wanted to serve this one up on a platter for Mallory. What is the average life expectancy of any domestic animal in Hawkins?
this is upsetting. The pets can't save the day, Chris, because they're not around.
It's true.
What happened to the Byers family dog? Very present, now neglected. Cruelly ignored, but present. In season 1, he's in the house, he's in the yard, he's barking at the shed, he's in Castle Byers. He is nowhere. In season 2, you know who is in season 2? Muse, Dustin's mom's cat. I can't even talk about this, it's so upsetting. Dart eats Muse, and then Dart, who, look, it's just his nature. I mean, I mourn Muse still to this day, but Dart was just, he's hungry, he needs to eat.
Animal Kingdom
Dart
stuff.
is also kind of a pet. He was Dustin's pet, and poor sweet Dart, when
Just
all those other
because
Dema
Dart
dogs.
was inside doesn't make him a pet. And I'll go
No,
a point
but his
further.
affection for his human does. He ate the Three Musketeers. He died. Poor sweet Dart died by the Three Musketeer wrapper down in the tunnels instead of going where everyone else stood. They all ran to the gate, and they fell in the tunnel in the gate, and Dart died alone by the wrapper.
I've given you a dispatch from the 80s in terms of pop culture. I want to tell you something else about the 1980s. We just had a much more normal relationship to our pets back then. In and out. You could get a new one. You could just get a new one. A lot more of that stuff. We didn't have blogs about how our dog was really a person. It was just like, oh, Sparky died? Let's get Rusty, you know?
Yeah, I'm supposed to believe that a man who doesn't like a warm cookie from Mrs. Fields has a shred of emotional vulnerability and intelligence. Protect Twos! Don't let anything happen to Twos!
This has been our 5 big questions about Stranger Things Season 3. Once the season drops on July 4th, you can find me and Mallory back here next week where we will break down the entire season with our buddy Jason Concepcion. Talk the Thrones crew is back. We'll talk some things.
Yeah, you bring the Eggos, I'll bring the new Coke.
Yeah.